Hello and welcome. This video is brought to you by the StreamingAdvisor.com. Tailor your entertainment with streaming. And what we're going to look at in this video is podcast players for the Roku platform. There are around 10 or 11 that I've run across through searching both on the Roku and via chat forums and things like that. But what I've done in this video is broken it down to what I consider the top 6. One little self-contained category. And we're going to start by looking at Spotify, which is one of the newer apps on Roku. Spotify, of course, is an excellent music app with a lot of music categories. But it also has podcasts. Unfortunately, we're looking at it right here, and you notice there is nothing on here that says podcasts, at least not on the home page. So when we go into search is when you start getting a feel for it. You'll see up at the top, artists, songs, or podcasts. So we would hope and expect that there would be a podcast section down here in this kind of nice little graphical display here. And you notice we're hitting up each row. There's 2 rows listed, and you just kind of cycle through. And yet, do we see a podcast section? No. So, you can look for podcasts by simply using the on-screen keyboard. So, podcast, and here, you've got stories podcast, artists, songs, albums, playlists, and finally podcasts. And from here, you can start looking at the podcasts that are available. And if you notice, there are a lot of recognizable names and popular ones like the Ron Burgundy podcast, but there is not really a way to cycle through or search for anything in particular this way. It's not categorized, and it also isn't even in alphabetical order. So we're going to look for a podcast that a friend of mine and I like a lot called How Did This Get Made? How Did This Get Made is a podcast about movies, and we're going to kind of use that as the standard bearer for this video. It's popular enough that it's pretty much found everywhere. So we're going to type the entire title in here because I don't want to putz around too much going back and forth in the menus. How did this get? Almost there. Sorry you have to watch me type this stuff, but I really wanted you to get a feel for what using these programs is like. So, how did this get made? You see it has playlists listed with these songs. So, what's that all about, huh? And again, something went wrong. Now, I don't understand why it would list something there if it didn't actually work. Apparently, there is some sort of an album with music from movies that they've done, but you keep on going, and here you finally find the podcast, and you not only have How Did This Get Made, but next to it you've got How Did This Get Played. That looks like the Nintendo Power font from way back in the 80s. I don't know if you'd recognize that or not. But once you jump in here, you see that the podcast itself is listed. It is up to date, and it even lets you know that it is explicit, so you know whether you should play that, around certain audiences or not. So that's always helpful. From there, you can listen to the podcast and follow it, which is going to add it to your library. You see that up in the corner. So the next time you come into Spotify, you don't have to search for your favorite podcasts. So this is one of those where once you get some things set up, it's a nice player. TuneIn, like Spotify, is a music app primarily, but I think they do a nice job on their podcasts compared to Spotify. You notice you can access it from the top menu there, and it's right in its own section. There's also another way to jump into it from the home page. I'll show you that, depending on what you prefer. You see what you want to listen to, and podcasts. What this does is it brings you to the same menu you were in before. I just wanted to show you that there were sort of, two entryways. And what these guys do is TuneIn has a whole lot of curated categories. People love curation most of the time, and in this case, this allows you to see a lot of different categories that are available. It has sort of editorial work. They're going to give you their favorites and what they think is interesting and things like that. That's good for beginners who are just looking to get into things, but it can kind of take away from the podcast experience in a way because, in general, podcasts are so personal. You can find the thing that you want to watch or listen to. And in this case, there is a number of categories. I think there's about 28, 29 as you cycle through. And in fitting with what we said earlier, we're going to go into comedies and we're just going to see where is How Did This Get Made? And you'll notice, again, there's not exactly any order to this. There's featured, there's shows, but in general, there is, you don't know where it is that you're going to find anything in particular. It's just something that you have to cycle through. So, like others, we're going to search and see how efficient the search is. Alright, there's a lot of different things. It looks like there's a podcast section. How doesn't immediately pull it up. It might be under the more section there. But we're going to continue and see how long this takes us to get up. There we are. So by the time we got to How Did This Get Made is on there. And it's a nice looking little interface. Nice and bright. Nice and big. And it takes advantage of the screen to a point. Of course, it's also trying to help you, upgrade to their premium service. But within their free service, you can favorite it, which, again, is going to help you build a library. So, that's all right. My tuner, this is kind of a disappointing one. While it's easy to find the podcast because you see they're listed right here over on the side, kind of in the old-fashioned Roku menu, kind of like the front page, it does not really break things down in any way in particular. You see that you got sports and politics and religion and everything sort of just a mishmash here. And that makes it pretty difficult to zero in on anything in particular. Now, there's an odd couple, right? Rachel Maddow and Sean Hannity. But in general, it pulls in a lot of popular things, but it's not exactly intuitive. Once we go into the search, we can, again, try to find How Did This Get Made? But in general, I think this is one of my least favorite of the setups because it seems like it could be so much more if they just put a little bit more effort into it. iHeartRadio is one of the more popular podcast players out there. Like others, it is a music-based sort of thing, but what you do here is you see right at the top, you can see that the podcasts are present, so you don't have to wonder if they're there. And when you jump in, you'll see that it has popular and featured, and then goes straight into its topics section. The topics are both like a category search and a subcategory. So you notice you have sports and fantasy football instead of fantasy football just being inside of sports. And there's a couple of other things like that in this section. But in general, there are a number of categories, and I think it's easy to search. It's not hard to find things, though I do wish they did something besides this old-fashioned left-to-right carousel. But once you jump into something, you can see what is out there. It has a search, and the search works pretty well. I'm going to look for, but because this is also a music channel, it is not going to specifically concentrate on podcasts. So as you start looking for how did this get made here, it's looking for the songs until eventually it says, okay, you're looking for this. You can follow, and once you follow, it goes into your library, and boom. So like others, you can build your own little listing and find what you want later. Now this is a private channel, and it used to be pretty much the standard bearer for podcasts on Roku. You'll notice it is very, very minimalistic. In fact, it doesn't even have any menus to start with. In general, you just have to know what you're looking for. If somebody says, hey, have you ever heard of this podcast? You go in, you look for it, and it gives you a choice to see audio and or video podcasts, depending on what you're looking for. You can search for both, but in the case of how did this get made, it's only an audio podcast. But while it's very minimal, you can see that it does kind of give you the information you need. It gives you the date it came on, it tells you what it's about, and like others, you can go in order to build your own little listing of podcasts. There are other ways to search for things. For instance, if you go in and you just search for a category like news, it will find news-based podcasts, and that's solid. It doesn't, of course, like the radio apps, it doesn't try to find you songs called News or Huey Lewis in the News or something like that. It's just going to find categories that have to do with the news. So we'll go to something real analogous here, something about Disney. You add it to the favorites right from the podcasts section, which I like. You don't have to get too far into things to add to favorites. And now under favorites, we've got these two. And so I like it in that it's really basic, really easy to get into, especially once you have it set up. There's just not a dearth of menus to deal with, and I really do like that. But finally, we're going to jump into Plex, and you might have seen my other video. Plex is really my favorite podcast app on Roku, and I think you'll see why here. First off, look at this. The Plex designers seem to understand that they're working with something that's going to be found on a TV screen, and on other forms. But its TV app looks like it's made for a TV in that you've got multiple things on the page at any given time that you can take a look at instead of having to go, so many clicks just to get to the 5th or 6th selection. Its category section is pretty straightforward, and again, the entire category section can be displayed on one page, though you notice that there's 15 at the moment. I guess if there was 28, you wouldn't be able to fit everything on the same screen, but at least you could fit 15 at a time. When you jump in, you'll see that it is organized in a way that you can search. It's in alphabetical order and numerical order. So it starts with your numbers and goes A to Z. I think that's really important because while you might not know exactly where something is, like you don't know whether it's the 50th podcast or the 100th podcast or the 1000th podcast, at least you know which section of the list you're going to find something. You'll notice it does have a little trouble keeping up as you're going through, down and down and down and down and down. But with, thousands of podcasts to choose from, I guess it has a little bit to cycle through. Its search feature works very fast. Plex is designed to be searched and, for your media and things like that, and the podcast section works every bit as good as searching for a movie or a TV show that you've got saved. And you see, you can add and remove things from your podcast list as soon as you jump in. So let's say you wanted to add How Men Think. You go right in, add to podcasts, and it's taken care of. No other menus to jump into. You don't have to jump into an episode. And, you jump into My Podcasts, and there it is, How Men Think, right next to How Did This Get Made? And once you've actually got things organized on this list, it will break things down by letter. Now, I wish that the categories themselves broke down by letter so you could just go straight to the B's or straight to the L's. And even something like a LA to LC or LD to LH. Something like that would be helpful. But if you go all the way to the right, you'll see that you can more quickly skip to the different letters. We're already into the E's, the F's. And again, you just can't discount the fact that it goes in alphabetical order. All of us do it. I don't know anybody who, when told to put something in alphabetical order, doesn't go, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, So it does that. And so it's going to be easier to find things. While there's an abundant selection, that does, maybe a little bit of curation isn't a bad thing. But the thing is that this platform lets you find what is out there and then put it together in a way that you can find it later. But in general, this really is. This is my favorite platform because I feel like it's easiest on the eyes. It seems to take into mind what you're actually doing with it. And I think it has one of the best searches overall. So that is podcasting for Roku. Stream on, my friends.